Hi, my name is Monica Yearwood. We are going to do a masterclass today on cognitive dissonance. So grab a pen and a piece of paper. We're going to be doing some assessments. You're going to be learning a lot. If you are somebody who has been in a narcissistic or a toxic relationship, or you have been betrayed by someone you care about, and you feel essentially like your mind is split. Um, you see a good version of them and a bad version of them, and you're unsure of which one is real, or you feel very differently emotionally about them. You sometimes love them and want to reconcile, or you fear and you even hate them and you feel like you want to get away from them, and you move back and forth between those two different emotional states, and you don't know how to reconcile those contradicting opposite emotions, feelings, and thoughts. And you look back in your history together and you wonder which of that was real. And you can also experience cognitive dissonance about yourself as well. How could I have stayed? I'm somebody who's smart, who's capable. How could this have happened to me? All of that sort of falls underneath the umbrella of what cognitive dissonance is. This class is really going to be about how to heal from cognitive dissonance. There's plenty of content out there that explains what cognitive dissonance is. I don't think that you need for me to do that right now. What you need is help in learning how to recover this, because it can be extremely maddening to know conceptually in your mind that a relationship or a person is bad for you, but also feel emotionally pulled and drawn to them, even if you're no longer with them. This can be really difficult if you have to co parent. And sometimes you may wonder if maybe it wasn't so bad, if maybe you could have repaired it, maybe you left too soon. This gets even more challenging if that person sometimes is hoovering you and insinuating that maybe you should get back together, or maybe you definitely don't want to get back together with them at all, but you're still dealing with a sort of emotional, mental replay of it, which can be absolute torture. So let's jump right into the material and see how we can move this forward a little bit for you today. All right, we're going to talk today about why your mind won't let go of somebody who hurt you, the hidden psychological conflict that keeps intelligent, self aware people stuck after toxic relationships, and how resolving the two-person paradox finally ends the mental loop for good. A note before you begin: you may notice as we go through this content and material that you have different emotions, thoughts, and feelings that come up. If you feel like you need to take a break, you can pause it. You can always come back to it. Just really take care of yourself. Try not to force yourself through it. So let's just do a little check in and make sure that you're in the right place. We're talking about cognitive dissonance today. This would be a good time to start taking some notes. So, to fix something, we have to understand exactly how the problem is showing up for you specifically. So cognitive dissonance is really kind of a very broad term, and how it may be showing up for you specifically might be different. And so whenever we want to change something, we want to get better, we want to look at first where are we at right now, and then what do we want, and then what's the pathway to getting there. Okay. So right now we'll just do an assessment. The two versions. This is really common. It's where you basically feel like there's two different versions of the same person. A Jekyll and a Hyde, a good version and a bad version of them, the one that you love and the one that you fear. So you can write down if that's true for you. Body still pulled. So that means that conceptually you understand that this relationship or this person is not healthy for you, but physiologically in your body, you still feel drawn to them. That may be loving them, wanting to reconcile or fix the relationship. That may just be an internal, fixation on them, looking at their social media, just not being able to let them go, justifying their behavior. So sometimes you may experience that you lose hold of a fact-based reality, where you could list, if you return to it, if you listed down what factually happened in the relationship. So, not what you think about what happened, not how you feel about what happened, but what factually happened in this relationship, and you had that list in your hand, it is easier for you to understand why the relationship has ended. But when you don't have that list handy and you get kind of lost in a loop of your own thoughts, you may minimize it or wonder if maybe there was something about you that brought this on, or maybe they didn't mean it like that, or some other way to sort of justify these acts that intellectually are pretty unforgivable or are unforgivable. Replaying the good memories. So this is where you lose hold on that fact-based reality and you're just remembering sort of a nostalgic way all the good things that happened in the relationship and you've totally disconnected from what has hurt you. So today what you're going to learn is you're going to learn the mental split. We're going to talk more deeply about not necessarily why this happens where you feel this division that there's a good version and bad version, but how to reconcile those opposing parts, how to resolve the physical pull if you feel this deep emotional drawing to them or love, how to stop the mental replay, and how to stop questioning your memory so that you see them truthfully and factually what actually happened in the relationship, and how to stop blaming yourself. Very briefly, as I said, there's so much information, and I know that those of you who are watching this are pretty heavily educated on a lot of these things now. But what is cognitive dissonance? Cognitive dissonance is it's essentially where we have two or more opposing views about the same person and or the same thing or the same situation, and this doesn't even just apply to a toxic or a narcissistic relationship. We can develop cognitive dissonance about a political figure, or we can about our children, about ourselves, about our life, and about a narcissistic person. Okay. And so it's where you have these two or more sort of opposing beliefs about the same person or thing. And the dissonance is the static between those two contradicting beliefs. And so that's really hard for our human brains to hold. And so what we will do is we will try to reduce the dissonance by eliminating one of the beliefs or one of the contradicting feelings. And in a toxic or a narcissistic relationship, that can look like, okay, he hurt me or she hurt me. It was my fault. I did something wrong. Um, she hurt me or she did something to me. They didn't mean it like that. That's not what they meant. They had something that happened in their childhood that caused them to do that, or I misinterpreted it. So there's all sorts of unconscious ways that we try to resolve that dissonance. And then when the relationship ends, that dissonance can get so loud, it can also contribute to things like rumination. So rumination is something that's related to cognitive dissonance, where you're trying to figure something out by replaying the same thoughts over and over and over again. Although with rumination is definitely not just psychological, which is the way that it tends to get approached. And you get, all these like, I don't know, different techniques that address the rumination on just a psychological level to think differently or to control your mind, which has a part, but rumination is also very much physiological, meaning that it's coming up from the body and has a relationship with the nervous system as well. So they're related, cognitive dissonance and rumination, many times, or they can be related. Not always, but they can be. And so that brings us to this next point with cognitive dissonance. It is also not just psychological. It's not necessarily just a mental thought, something that you just need to think through or think harder or think differently. It's biopsychological, meaning that our mind and our body play a part in how we are experiencing cognitive dissonance. There's an emotional component, there's the biological component, so our attachment system, cortisol, oxytocin, all the things when we talk about the trauma bond. And so how this, with cognitive dissonance specifically for people in these relationships, we're talking about traumatic cognitive dissonance. So this isn't even just, regular of the mill daily cognitive dissonance that we all can experience from time to time. This is traumatic cognitive dissonance where there's like a split in the psyche where you are literally seeing a reality A and a reality B. And you not only see these two different versions of them, but you feel two different ways about them. There's an emotional state that comes with how you see this person. It's not just psychological. Again, it's emotional, it's physical. And you can vacillate between these two versions of them. That is what can contribute to this mental loop that you experience of rumination. Which version was real? Did I misunderstand something? Would the loving version have stayed? What if the good moments were the real ones? So, why does cognitive dissonance persist even when you understand all of this? Because most of our tools that we have available to us help encourage us to rely on our thinking mind, reading, analyzing, journaling, or trying to logically understand why the relationship was unhealthy. Um, Seeking closure from them, thinking that or feeling is it may not even be seeking, but feeling like they hold your closure if they would just emotionally validate you or have one less conversation with you. Focusing on the negative, this can be a sneaky one. So, which we can do a lot of times through narcissism research. Like if I just learn every horrible thing about them, then I can get away from some of these other emotions that may be uncomfortable, whether that's love or guilt or shame or self-blame. And what that's really doing is it's not addressing those emotions. You're just suppressing them and trying to hold onto the conviction, and that can be helpful, it's and important in a certain leg of your journey, but eventually the next step is really going into feeling those different types of emotion and confronting those too, and that can be really, really uncomfortable. Uncomfortable feelings feel uncomfortable to feel, and we often want to get away from the pain as much as possible. But if you really want to get over the pain, it isn't going around it, it's going through it. Moving on quickly. Oh my gosh, dating again, staying busy, distracting yourself so you don't feel the conflict, replaying, imagining how conversations could have gone differently if you'd handled things better. None of these things work. None of these things work to get you out of cognitive dissonance. Why doesn't logic alone help this just to go away? Why doesn't it fully resolve? Because this is a biopsychological problem. You need a biopsychological solution. What makes cognitive dissonance in regard to a toxic or narcissistic relationship traumatic is that all the things that had happened in it, right? So the intermittent reinforcement, which is basically something pretty much all of us have experienced, how that may have showed up for your relationship may be different. That part may not all be the same for everyone else, for everyone. For example, in your relationship, you may have experienced 1, 2, 3, 5 years of what seemed like an idealized partnership, and then you had a child, and right after that, everything changed and they went on a rage. Some people suspect and feel and see red flags early on, but they continue the relationship anyway. That's a whole nother conversation. And so it's right from the beginning. Maybe they were hot, cold with you right from the beginning. And so intermittent reinforcement, just like all the terms in the sort of toxic narcissistic relationship world, there's a universal understanding and then there's nuance to your unique experience. And those differences may be, unique to you or they're not. Everybody's, story is a little bit different essentially. But intermittent reinforcement probably happened. How it happened may be different. Trauma bonding, that is the biochemical oxytocin, cortisol, that can happen in these relationships. future faking, your partner creating an idealized future about what was going to happen, your dreams, your ideas about your future, essentially, which turned out to be false, and nervous system attachment. And so we form our first primary attachment to our parents, and these relationships hurt our attachment system. And so even if you were securely attached as a child, a relationship like this can injure your attachment systems. There are 4 stages of cognitive dissonance. Right now, I think it could be helpful to assess which of the 4 stages you are in. Um, at some point in your relationship, there was the what I call the birth of the split. And so the birth of the split could have been 2 years into your relationship, your partner flew off the handle and went on a rage. And it just totally contradicted, like, "What?" You know? "This is not how I see this person," or they're being so irrational over something so small that it's almost difficult to believe that that's real, you know? Like, you could resolve that. Or maybe you always thought that they had the most integrity and morality, and they were just a good person, and then you find out that they've been living a secret life with multiple affairs and cheating on you and doing all these horrible things, and you just can't believe it that that happened. Or the birth of the split can also be much more sneaky, where maybe they started to be chronically demeaning to you. They started coming home in a really bad mood, without you realizing it. You started self-adjusting, and maybe you tried making them their favorite meal, or keeping the house cleaner, or doing these things you didn't notice at the time, that you were making all these adjustments for their moods, their behaviors, and that you were essentially walking on eggshells for, years or even decades. So that's the birth. What we're essentially saying is that this dissonance, this divide in your mind started from somewhere. Most people don't seek help now, right? They don't fully understand that there's a problem that is starting to happen in the relationship. And for preventative reasons, the birth of the split is so important to understand for preventative reasons, because the red flag that was happening at the birth was that something didn't feel right. Something wasn't feeling right in your system. And that sense that something doesn't feel right was going to continue to grow, whether you were aware of it or not. And so, for preventative reasons, that is what you need to have your pulse on. The dissonance continued to escalate. So, more things start happening that are contradicting who you think this person is. It could be more rages, more negative behavior, um, something that they've done, and you're feeling more what most people call confusion. Confusion is rising, and confusion is another important red flag that we often dismiss, that we don't understand. And so, for preventative reasons, it's something we have to pay attention to. And still, people usually don't get help here. Peak dissonance. This is now where you're really confused. You're really confused, and you are vacillating emotionally. It really does seem like there's absolutely 2 different versions of them, and you don't know which one is real. Things may be happening in your relationship that are really escalating, or you just don't feel safe. You could move back and forth between emotional states. You could have really good weeks with them, even good months, and then they go out of town and you have an anxiety attack. There probably have been multiple things now that have happened in the relationship as well. Residual dissonance. Residual dissonance usually happens after the relationship ends. And residual dissonance could be like, you feel like you're doing pretty well, but also, if you're honest with yourself, your point of comparison, because of what you've come from, like doing very well, may not be the best that you could be doing. And your bar for yourself, your own psyche, your mental and emotional health can get low because you've just been in hell. And so that can be sneaky about residual dissonance of what we accept. And so that can look like you maybe have a week or two of being on a really good streak. And then all of a sudden, a Saturday random afternoon, you're going down a rabbit hole of replaying the relationship and even maybe even secretly longing for them or secretly wondering if things could have been different. Or you have residual dissonance around yourself and feeling shameful that you stayed. How could it can change form the dissonance, be more self-directed? How could I have stayed for so long? How I'm smart. I'm I do things with my life. Like how could I have put up with that? That's cognitive dissonance around your own personal identity. So before we go on, which of these features do you see in yourself most right now? So in this next series of slides, we're going to do two things. We're going to assess where you are at, get very clear about that, and then we're going to help you to define what you want. So this can be a really helpful tool in our healing process is to making some decisions and commitments around what we want to be different. It is creating a goal. It's creating a psychological, emotional, and physical goal. Some questions to help you to assess what you want. Write down any of these that you feel like are true for you. Are you having episodes where you're wondering what if? You wonder if the outcome could have been different if you had communicated better, been more patient, or handled certain moments differently. Do you have an identity conflict where a part of what hurts is realizing that staying doesn't align with who you believe yourself to be, someone thoughtful, strong, and self respecting? Are you wanting comfort for them? So even after recognizing the relationship wasn't emotionally safe, there are still moments you wish you could turn to them for comfort. Are you grieving the future? So part of you is tied not just to the relationship itself, but to the future you believed you were building together. Do you feel like you've lost pieces of yourself? You feel like you lost pieces of yourself in the relationship and you are still trying to reconnect with who you were before it began. Understanding these things is going to help you to define what you need. Now, let's define what you want to be different. What do you want? How would you feel? Like, what would tell you that you were getting better? What would be happening in your life, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, physically, where you would feel like, oh my gosh, I'm healing, I am getting better? Is it understanding why you stayed? That's an important question. All of us need to understand and know the answer to that question because your answer may be totally different than somebody else's. You may have stayed because maybe your relationship mirrored something from your past or your childhood that you didn't heal, and this was a continuation of a pattern. Someone else may have stayed because they grew up in a totally healthy, nothing eventful happened in their childhood, and their parents were married forever and ever, and they were always loyal, and nobody was, dysfunctional or mean in their home when they grew up. And so they had no point of reference for what does dysfunction look like. And they thought when they were staying with their partner that they were being loyal and they were being um, a wife or a husband and they were doing the right thing by staying. And they didn't realize how that they were being abused. They didn't even know it. And so understanding why you stayed is not necessarily something that a book will tell you. A book can help you find that answer, the right book. Um, but there's not a prescriptive answer that's going to apply to every person. Every person didn't have an issue with a parent. There's differences. Do you want to stop feeling responsible for them? Do you feel inside yourself that you want to save them, fix them, or carry guilt for their pain? And if you could let that go, then you would feel very free. Is it the rumination? Maybe you're thinking about them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And for you, growth would look like that you've gone an entire day, or maybe it's an entire morning, or you just wake up in the morning and they're not the first thing on your mind. Feeling like yourself again, or feeling emotionally free, or anything else that might not be on this page. Write that down now. Why this matters. it matters because now you've defined where you're at, you've assessed how this is currently manifesting for you, and you've also defined what you want. You've also written down some things that would tell you that you were moving that direction, right? And you're essentially creating a customized healing path designed for your unique experience. Because, yeah, there are these universal principles that we can all identify with, but there's also customization and nuance and context. That's why I tend to shy away from these universal labels like codependency or you're an empath or only narcissists get with, codependence because there's so much variability. I think it's also really important to create a future self reflection. So if you could project into your future 6 months from now or a year from now, you would know you were healing if. How would your life be different if you had the right tools and skills to get you closer to where you would want to be? What does that actually look like? There is a framework for resolving cognitive dissonance that is in general universal for everyone. There are 6 pillars that make up this framework that will help you to stop thinking about them and get the peace back that you want, and each one is equally important. But most people favor one or two of these. So we defined where you're at, we've defined what you want, and we've said that you're going to need different tools on your path that are going to help you to achieve that. Okay, so here they are. Here they are. And most people are favoring one or two of these. And that's why you're not getting the kind of results that you probably want for in your life. The first is cognitive integration or the mind. The first step in reducing dissonance is accepting the two different versions of them instead of like wanting it to be one or the other. The first thing that we do is allow them to coexist and accepting it. So that takes a little bit to, instead of trying to figure out which version of them is real and going through all your memories, like, was that the real or wasn't that the real? Just letting them both simultaneously exist at the same time. That is the first step. Emotional processing the body. So our emotions aren't just feelings like I'm sad or I'm happy. Our emotions are neurological processes in the body that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We suppress our emotions when we experienced an emotional injury and we weren't able to complete that cycle in the moment. A child, for example, that gets hurt ideally has a parent with them that is able to help them come to a state of regulation, and they're able to complete that emotional cycle. And for a child, it's really important that they aren't doing that alone, that they have an assistant of a caregiver who loves them, cares for them, that helps them to find that regulation. And so as adults, when somebody betrays us or hurts us and they caused an attachment injury essentially to us, and then they're not giving us the information or they're lying to us, so they're manipulating us, we aren't able to complete that cycle. Those emotions stay in our system and stay in our body. Years of walking on eggshells is also the emotion accumulates in our system. Big betrayals or traumas, the emotion stays with us in our physiology. So then when you are in no contact with someone, you feel very emotionally dysregulated because those emotions are coming to surface, but it's not new emotions. A lot of those emotions have been there for a long time. They just were suppressed. And now in no contact, they come up. And that's why you're emotionally cycling. And the way through that isn't white knuckling it, like trying to distract yourself, drinking wine, watching TV, shopping, venting to a friend, to relieve yourself of the emotion. It's learning practices that actually help you to process it. Okay, so this is probably one of the bigger ones that I see people avoiding in this work because it's hard to sit in our own discomfort. So we avoid it. And for a lot of us, there's been a lot of emotional wounding. So there's a lot there. Intellectual understanding. This is where people tend to spend most of their time when it comes to recovering from a narcissistic relationship. And I've gone through a toxic and a narcissistic relationship myself. And so I understand the brain of wanting to just research and acquire all the information. And there's definitely a need for that. There's also some limitations to it because it it reaches a point sometimes where it's no longer facilitating the type of change that you want in your life. Identity repair, we can develop cognitive dissonance towards other people, but also towards ourselves. Reclaiming who you are as a person. Another reason why I'm not a fan of the codependent label. And I also don't think it's accurate most of the time. Most of the women that I work with aren't picking people to save, help, heal, fix in order to, you know, maintain their own personal identity. And it's not to say that some people don't have a codependent personality that they've had their entire life, but most of the women that I worked with developed what looks like codependency, but it is very different than having a codependent personality. When you are over functioning as a result of being in a highly manipulative relationship, that is different than having a codependent personality, which isn't, by the way, a real diagnosis and came from AA and NA. Being witnessed. So, this is not something that you can heal from in isolation. You need witnesses, community to listen to your story and also to hear their story, um, to mirror with you. That will help with regulation. It's going to teach you a lot about yourself, future self orientation. So eventually it's like, okay, when it's time, when it's appropriate, when it's ready, but what is it that you want in your life going forward? Going forward, what kind of relationships do you want? What makes you happy? And again, now decentering your healing, because even this stuff then can become part of our identity. And it's like you've got to then let this go, right? Is letting go of the way that the healing has now become centered in your life. So it's definitely a process, and this isn't like a step 1 to 6 type situation. And it's not necessarily something that happens in an instant, but it's all more process oriented work. But these are the 6 pillars that you need to help you to get through that. If this is work that you're interested in, this is work that I do. I work with professional women who can maintain no or low contact and have already decided that they want the relationship to end. Whether you were discarded or you're in an on and off again cycle, and right now it's off, and you know you're vulnerable to taking your partner back. It doesn't mean that you don't have fears around the relationship ending, but if you could push a magical button, you would end the relationship. If that is you, you can take my very short 27-minute long masterclass that I've created for women that can maintain no or low contact and are no longer in the relationship by clicking the link in the caption. Thank you.